Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join Martin, Dave, Spencer and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
So welcome to another T2 Hubcast with me, Martin Johnson.
And me, Spencer Locker.
How are you doing, Spence?
All right, mate, you?
Yeah. Tired?
No.
Not really.
No. For change.
I say that because Spencer's been travelling this week.
Yeah.
Been, I can't remember, where did you
Leamington Spa.
Leamington Spa,
Yeah.
down delivering some sessions for the military charities.
Yes. Yeah, lots of good people doing good work.
Yeah. That's the quite rewarding stuff, isn't it? With us
Very
being,
much so, yeah.
With us being military background, and when you get to go and do, make a difference for people who are generally doing good in the world,
Yes.
it's a double whammy, right?
Yeah.
So Spencer's been on the road all week. He's got back this morning in usual fashion. I've dropped it on him with 20 minutes notice that I wanted to pick his brains and sort of interview him on an area that we've been working with clients on recently, and that we've written some research on the hub on.
Yeah.
Which Spencer's led on the research side. And it's a little bit of a grey area. It's a little bit of one of those areas where a lot of people use the terminologies, but we tend to confuse things and we tend to not fully understand what it means. So we just wanted to jump on here, Spencer, for half an hour and talk about organisational design and organisational development. The two ODs. And what are they? What is the general premise and difference between them? And how do they interlink almost intrinsically in the organisation as part of an overall overarching strategy and direction going forward? So I think we'll just, as usual, we've not planned it, but I'm going to pick your brains. I'm going to refer to a research paper or a pathway that Spencer's written recently on this, and just get you to clarify a few points. But before we start, Spencer, what was your main findings in the journey of looking into organisational design and development? Any high level observations to start with?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Martin. High level, I'm not sure I can give you, but I can give you my initial reactions. So you remember I spent quite an inordinate amount of time researching about organisational design. We were talking about it. There was a lot of people that we actually had the opportunity to talk to. We had a certain amount of knowledge ourselves, but we thought, you know what, our customers, Trans2 Performance customers, don't need a little bit of knowledge. They need something current. Yeah. So we decided to sort of really go into the organisational design bit. So we talked about organisational design. We wrote a couple of pathways on organisational design and organisational redesign. And we went into a certain amount of depth, as much as really you need to go. And then a couple of months later, you turned around to me and you said, Spence, organisational design or organisational development, there is a difference.
Yeah.
So my initial thoughts were, and this wasn't aimed at you, but it was because you pitched that to me, and then we started talking and discussing about there are people who see OD as organisational design.
Yeah.
There are people who see things as organisational development, and there is a real possibility that somebody could actually sort of say, when you say OD, do you mean organisational design or organisational development? My chimp came out, and I thought to myself, people like that need to grow up, really. If they've got time to be able to get outraged and upset by things like that, then they're obviously not being productive enough. So, my chimp went back in a little bit, and I did a little bit of research. And I think, to be honest with you, there's a way around it. Since we've actually done this, since we've actually produced this pathway, I've reflected on it. It might surprise you to know that since this has actually been out, since this has been published, I think I would like to review it.
Yeah.
And rather than calling it OD, design or development, I think we should rechristen it ODD, organizational design and development.
Yeah.
Because they're not totally independent. They need each other.
Yeah. And as I said in the intro, they are intrinsically linked, and it's a great point you make. Should we? I mean, and the other thing we found, Spence, was depending on whether you work in North American organisations and cultures versus European, we have different opinions on design and development and what OD means, etc. So, ODD. Organisational design and development should be intrinsically linked. Yeah. They are different,
yes,
but they come together, and one feeds the other, and vice versa, as you have written in your research paper. Yeah. So, okay, let me let's start by, if I just read, I've got your paper in front of me. If I just read the definitions of organisational design and development, then we can start there. Yeah. And then we can talk around how they're linked and how they feed each other and what we need to be considering as organisations and leaders. Yeah. So organisational design, right? If we start with that piece, when we this is what you wrote in your paper. Yeah. When we talk about design, we are creating a what we want situation. We are looking at what we want to achieve and how we can achieve it. You design a room, a home, a structure. It's like a wish list. You know the purpose of the design. It has to provide us with the end result. And to achieve that, it must give us the A, B, C, and D. How many of us have seen an artist's impression of a car or building before it actually exists? That is a design, what we want at the end. Yes. So what you're saying there, Spence, is organisational design is where the investors, shareholders, board members, leaders, directors, whoever it is who's responsible at the higher echelons of an organisation, it is their responsibility to say, what do we deliver here? What's the end game, right? What do we need to achieve? And therefore, how are we going to set up as an overarching design to be able to deliver upon that?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You know what you need to achieve. Whether it's, even if I can introduce a third aspect to this, whether it's organisational design or organisational redesign, you are moving from a position to another position. How are you going to get that? How are you going to change that position? Whether it's a total change or whether it's an evolution of what you already do, things are going to change, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether it's organisational design, as in a blank sheet of paper, or organisational redesign, in which case you're going to modify exactly what you are where you are aiming for, you have an ideal. This is what we want to achieve.
And you know what? You make a great point, because any organisation should be going through quite a continual, regular redesign process, because as the years go on and as the organisation evolves, organically things change, and your design therefore is going to naturally evolve and change with it, which is a redesign, right? Yeah. Now, the way it works is, and most listeners to this will resonate with this, is nobody really truly sets out at the beginning of their business venture or journey or early days as a startup or as an early adopter, whatever it might be. Nobody really does an intense piece of design work. What tends to happen is we design a product or service, or we have an idea. Right, we do some research, hopefully, into if there's a market for this, right? Yeah, and we then set up and we're up and running. Yeah, the design piece originally just morphs and evolves. You end up with an organisation or with a company that has a design, but it's purely by accident. It's like however this thing has morphed as a result of the things we've discovered along the way we need to do. So, arguably, the design piece is a natural evolution of the early days. So what then takes place is all of a sudden we sort of say to ourselves, it's like in the hourglass theory I talk about, oh my God, we've got a business here, right? This is getting serious. We now have customers. We have, we have a business model. We have revenue coming in. And all of a sudden then that's when the design piece starts to take place, because people go, right, what do we need? Computer systems? How many staff do we need? What about logistics, right? What about partners and providers? And we start to then consciously think about the design, but essentially it's a redesign of what already exists. And to your point, Spence, however old you are as an organization, even if there's companies listening to this who are 10, 15 years in, there's always going to be change and a constant redesign of the way you are physically set up to deliver on the thing you need to do, or the product or service you need to provide.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's established. and I know some people might be listening to this, if you're an OD guru or if you're a HR person, you might be thinking this is really sort of basic, but believe me, it's not clearly understood. So to summarize, a design is what you want to achieve in the end. It's the end game of we need to deliver X or we need to fulfill X, and therefore how are we going to set up structurally from a people perspective, partner perspective, technological perspective, process perspective, how are we going to design this organization to deliver that upon that?
Certainly.
So organizational development.
Right.
This is the one I dropped on you afterwards.
Yeah.
Spence, most people, certainly in the HR sector, if you say OD to them, they will think about organizational development. It's fair to say that generally in the UK and in Europe, the OD acronym is more synonymous with organizational development than design. Certainly in the learning development and the HR space.
Yeah.
So let me just read out your definition, and then I'll hand over to you to sort of feed into your findings when you looked into this after the design piece. So if we've got our design, right, we've got our ideal organization development. So we have so this is what you've written, Spence. So we have our design, our fantasy, our ideal. If the design has been structured correctly, it will be closer to reality than fantasy. And I love that line because it's okay having a design which is the utopia.
Yeah.
But it's not always possible.
It's got to be realistic and achievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's structured and it will be closer to reality than fantasy. Parameters will be defined, processes examined, market trends analysed, and communication lines established. Now we implement it, and the implementation will produce changes and challenges. Many suggest that organisational development is ensuring that the design is in a condition to achieve its purpose, which we like to challenge, right? So I like this, Spence. You've challenged that instantly. That to you is maintenance. And in many situations, maintenance is simply maintaining performance. Whilst we can maintain the process, the whole idea of design and development is surely to enhance and improve the situation. Therefore, we can see design as the vision and the end result, and development as the process of turning that concept into a reality.
Yeah.
So simply put, the design is what we need to achieve to deliver on the end game, how we should set up, but the development is the ongoing process and almost the strategy and plan to, in your opinion, not just maintain, but to improve and enhance all of those facets and areas that will make that design a reality.
Yes. When we start talking about the word maintenance, we can look at the word maintenance as in maintaining the status quo, as in not developing, not moving forward, not improving, things like that.
So, for example, let me just give an example, Spence, for the listeners. Your early design might be, I need X amount of staff in these departments. I need these roles filling to execute on what we do.
Yeah.
I need these 3 core systems. We need a CRM system, a finance system, and a planning system, right? We need a small logistics operation, and other than that, where we can basically maintain and transact what we do. So if you didn't have a true development strategy and you only have the design and you are just maintaining that from a staffing level, from a systems perspective, from a logistical perspective, etc., that's not development, and it's dangerous.
Yes,
it's where organizations fall foul. Performance-wise, right?
Yes, yeah. And again, we've got to check when people use the word maintenance. We actually appreciate the context they're using it in. So if we're maintaining the way things are going, then we're not making any advancements. We're not making any improvements. However, if we have a design and we are maintaining a design, as in no matter what happens on that journey of development, we are still maintaining what we want to achieve, then yes, I can appreciate that. However, we run into that trap of mistaking the context.
Yeah.
And this is, again, when people start talking about the differences between the two ODs, design and development, well, if you start using the acronym OD, and then one person's talking about design and one person's talking about development, but then they don't actually clarify which they're talking about, they're not going to understand where each other's coming from, because people be so let's say, for the sake of argument, I'm talking about OD, organisational design, and you're talking about OD, organisational development. And when I'm talking about things, you're sat there thinking, that sounds like design to me, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about development. Then you start talking, and I'm listening to, well, that sounds like development, and we're not talking about development, we're talking about design. And then we get that miscommunication. When we start talking about development, as you read out there, we are developing, we are moving forward.
And this is the key thing we've taken from our research, isn't it? The OD, the organisational development side of that, it has to include every facet of the design, not just the people and cultural element. Now, but some of the mistakes we make is generally organisational development falls under HR leaders and HR personnel.
Yeah.
So they default primarily down the people and cultural and behavioural route, which is a large part of it, right? But going back to my model and my example of, the logistics, the technology and systems and the staffing, right? If that is part of the design, organizational development, true development would be not to maintain that, but to how can we improve every area, not just the people, but it might be for the fact that we've been using these 3 systems for the last 3 years. And yes, they allow us to transact what we do, but we could do twice as much if we either, if we encapsulated all of these into one technology, or we change systems, or we did something that allows us to do something more efficiently, more cost efficiently, etc. So a constant review of developing the systems is true development. And the same on logistics, right? 3 years in, we might say, do you know what? It's so expensive to run our own logistics operation. If we outsourced it to company A, we could save ourselves 6 figures and have a much richer, much more agile service, right? That's development.
Yes, of course.
So it shouldn't just be focused, and development shouldn't just be reserved for the people and cultural element.
Yes.
And you mentioned this in the pathway, right?
Very much so. When we start talking about the actual processes, and we start listening to buzzwords, and we start listening to people saying certain things. Have you ever listened to any, what was that? There was a thing on the news earlier on, and it was, I tell you what it was, talking about water. On the news earlier on, and they were talking about the fact that we're actually running a risk of becoming water poor in this country, the quality of clean water that we get through our pipes. And it was talking, these people were talking about water and the fact that we need water for this, that, and the other. And then a comment was made that the water companies are committed to quality. And as soon as they said, we are committed to this, it just reminds me of politicians that are sort of saying, we're committed to it. We made that statement, but we won't actually produce that. Once you get a company and they're sort of talking about organisational design, and they say, we are committed to being robust and resilient in our organisational design. But to some people, robust and resilient means rigid and inflexible. But we can't be rigid and inflexible because things change. As we know, as we've experienced, as our clients have experienced, robust and resilient isn't rigid and inflexible. It's adaptable through development and evolution.
So to your point, therefore, then, the right way to go with development is a statement around we are committed to the continual development of our organisation, which will deliver the best product or service to you.
There you go.
And that might not be robustness and resilience. That might be innovation and transformation continuously, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Love that. So, but to our point here, therefore, is it dangerous, Spence, for organisational development to sit purely in the HR function then, given the what's involved in it, and it's not just people, culture, and behaviours. It's absolutely around the processes, the technological capability of your organisation. It's around your product and service portfolio. It's multifaceted, which means surely then organisational design and development should have some form of counsel at a board level. It should have some form of stakeholder management, which stretches far beyond the HR department.
I believe that you've got to start looking at making people accountable for what they're accountable for. So you can't make HR a people-centric department accountable for processes and technology, that would be inconceivable, really, because they've got no SME input into that.
Yeah.
So we've got to start talking about collaboration.
Love
and
it.
Definitely when we're talking about executive management level.
So I still think that there needs to be some accountability for driving and being of almost being responsible for this. So let's say in an organisation we had a senior level executive who was responsible for organisational design and development.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to the ongoing development of the design, we need sort of a 2 or 3 pronged approach. Then we need the CIO or the IT director driving the systems aspect of the development. We need the HR lead taking the people and cultural and behavioural element. We need a business transformation director taking a lead on processes and operations. So it's a collaboration, and therefore we're developing the whole design rather than just going to HR. You're responsible for development. And then what happens is we focus more on the people, culture and behaviours and less so on the influence that's not within our sphere, if that makes sense.
So you've got organisational design. The organisational design, the person who's responsible for organisational design, is identifying where you're starting from and where you're going and the route. Yeah?
So is it fair to say then a CEO or MD should be driving that as an example?
I think so. I think that's perfectly
From
feasible.
a design perspective, the real driver of that has to be someone who's on the hook for the overall performance of the organisation, right?
Yeah.
Or it certainly needs to be instigated from them or sponsored or owned.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to that set, communicated and agreed, the ongoing development then branches out into the heads of, right?
Yeah.
But you've got technological, you've got the process and operations, and you've got the people.
Yeah.
And there's different people who will be driving those agendas. So that we need a real consortium, a real collaboration on organisational development.
And it's got to be collaboration because at the end of the day, pardon me, let's just say for the fact that you've got to leave here and go to Manchester Airport and you've got to transport 8 people and their luggage to Manchester Airport. Well, let's look at that from a project perspective. So when we talk about technology, we can say, right, so the technology people supply the minibus and the HR people supply the driver. And whoever else is, we all sort of collaborate to make sure that this journey, you achieve the destination. However, if the minibus broke down, you wouldn't necessarily blame the driver, would you?
Yeah.
Because the driver's doing it while I'm... So...
And this is probably happening subconsciously in organisations, and that's where siloed behaviour and politics comes from. Because if you're not aligned as a HRD or a chief people officer or whatever you call them in organisations, and they're not aligned with the IT director or the CIO, who is in turn not aligned with the chief operating officer or the head of operations, and they're all trying to deliver upon the design of the organisation, but not collaborating, communicating and doing their own thing, it doesn't work. It breaks down, right? Everybody's trying to achieve their goals and shine the light on their departments. And, it doesn't work, whereas the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So where we see it working well, in true OD, i.e. organisational development, there is really strong collaboration and connections on the stakeholders and the people who are driving the strategic agendas for people, process, and technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the guy at the top is accountable. The people below him, who he has constructed his team, they're responsible.
Yeah.
So they're responsible for delivering what he
or she,
whatever whatever they've stated. So if a statement this is what we want to achieve, and I'm going to appoint people who are going to be responsible for the different facets of this. Yeah. But because he's top of the tree, they're top of the tree, sorry, because they're top of the tree and because they've identified who is responsible, then they're accountable. And there's a subtle difference between accountability and responsibility.
We mentioned this in culture. The problem with the shared responsibility is that it's nobody's problem. And never mistaken responsibility for contribution or accountability and responsibility for contribution. The MD, CEO, whoever it is, or the board level or the strategic level executive who's driving the design of the organisation and deciding upon it, they are accountable and responsible. They are on the hook for driving the performance of the business. However, the stakeholders who are responsible for delivering the areas of organisational development to deliver upon the design, they need to massively own their areas and contribute in a meaningful way. And they can only do that if they collaborate.
Yes.
It has to all work together. And this is why we say the leadership element matters. You know, if you've got an inspiring leader at the top who's very clear on the design or the redesign or the journey and can really bring that alive in the mind of the stakeholders and really articulate what they're responsible for, right? They're going to go away with the confidence to be able to hatch a plan, to execute upon it, to collaborate with their peers and colleagues, to make sure we make this a reality and deliver on what we need to do. And that's why this thing is so complex. If people get it right, it really works. Yeah. But you can see that there's so much can go wrong with this. Yeah. From a communication perspective, from a collaboration perspective, from a systems and technology perspective, from an operations perspective, right? There's so much that can interfere with the journey that people can either become resistant, combative, negative, give up. Yeah. And that's where organizations fail to make progress. Yeah. Definitely. So with 5 minutes left, let me just recap what we've talked about, Spence, and any final comments from you. So for any HR professionals out there, all senior leaders in business, or anybody who's just developing themselves and wants to better understand what this OD space is, we feel like you've got two things at play. You've got your organizational design, which is the end game, the structure, the design of how you want to look, operate, and deliver upon what you do. Yeah. And then you've got the organizational development, which is how are we going to continuously not only maintain, but drive and improve upon every facet to make that design a reality, to deliver upon the design. And that can, as we say, straddle across people, process, technology, operations, product, service, multitude of things. So it requires collaboration. Yes. The design is a strategic piece of work that once it's done, you know, it's done for a period of time until we redesign. Yeah. Whereas organizational development is an ongoing and evolving and ever-changing thing. Yeah. It never stops. It's never final. Because once you've improved upon something, it's time to start the process again. Yeah. Where's our next improvement coming from? What else can we do? Yeah. It's an ongoing living thing, is organizational design. It's not just a HR thing, right? HR people tend to lead upon it, certainly from a people, cultural and behavioral perspective, but it takes a collaboration from other leaders and stakeholders, so because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Certainly. And organizations who get this right are very clear on the differences between the two. The design is owned and driven by someone of influence, usually high level. The organizational development needs to be broken down and contributed by a multitude of leaders within and departments within the organization. Certainly. And that's an evolution, ongoing thing. Redesign, a couple of minutes left, Spence, but I mean, there's no fixed amount of time to redesign your organization. It's just when it's most appropriate. Sometimes it happens without it being intentional, right? Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think some people fall into the trap of overcomplicating things, of really sort of making it a bit more than it actually has to be. I mean, there is a certain amount of, as you said, collaboration and planning and designing. I get that totally. But when you start talking to somebody who isn't necessarily directly involved in it, they can see complications rather than the basic fundamentals. And we can see that when we talk about people. When we talk to people, I mean, how many times do we turn around to somebody and say, what's your 5-year plan? What are your plans? What do you want to do when you grow up or whatever? The thing is, as an individual, you have a design. You have what I want to do, what I want to be, where I want to go. That might not have a time span. But as you go through life, stuff don't work as planned, does it? Yeah. It doesn't work as planned. So you develop, you evolve as an individual. So then you look back and you can see that the path of your life has changed somewhat to adapt to be able to achieve the goal. And then you redesign. Yeah. Move on, move forward. So it's don't over engineer it. Let go with what needs to be done based on the situations that arise. Right, final 30 seconds. The one thing I'm going to leave people with, Spence, is what you said today. We started off by asking the question, OD, does it mean organisational design or development or both? Well, let's just think of it as ODD. They are intrinsically linked. An organisation should be looking at organisational design and development as a whole. And make them link and have the right people in place, the right stakeholders, and drive collaboration.
Certainly.
Awesome. Spencer Locker, thank you very much. And we'll see you.
Thank you, Martin.
See you soon for another T2 Hubcast.
Cheers.